Attention everyone! Wayfair's Black Friday preview sale is here early. Right now, get up to 70% off everything you need for the season ahead. Save on furniture and bedding, cookware and holiday decor, and tons more. Now's the time to score big on finds to feast, get festive, and get comfortable all season long. Plus, enjoy fast and easy shipping with delivery in time for the holidays. Save up to 70% off early Black Friday deals. Shop now at wayfair.com.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
They were healing. Their symptoms were resolving because trauma and integrated trauma also underpins a whole myriad of mitochondrial related chronic conditions, which I know you're probably far more versed in than I am as a little scientist over here. And you're a rock star clinician. So, you work with it every single day. So what we found is that we could then start. It's like, how can I maintain my healing gains? Like, I've made this progress, but I'm going to go to work and my healer's heart is going to be run through the paper shredder, or I'm going to get steamrolled. It's not safe. I'm going to have too high of a caseload, a patient load. I'm being floated to a unit where I have zero training. I've got gaslighting, bullying, insufficient resources, and the list goes on.
Welcome to Nurses with Voices. I'm Dr. Lendra, your host and fellow nurse who's traded in burnout for breakthroughs. I'm here to show you how to transform your nursing career into one filled with purpose, reduced stress, and incredible opportunities. Whether you're looking to start your own business, build generational wealth, or simply find a healthier role in nursing, this podcast is for you. Join me to explore practical strategies to overcome burnout, combat bias, and chart new paths in nursing. It's time to reclaim your voice and reimagine your future in healthcare. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Nurses with Voices. I'm Dr. Lendra, and today I have Dr. Lorre Laws. Dr. Lorre is a Toastmasters International award-winning speaker, storyteller, and author of Nursing Our Healer's Heart. And I love that. It's a recovery guide for nurse trauma and burnout. Now, for the listeners, you know that burnout is definitely my mantra, and I love being able to partner with other nurses who are doing the same thing. And because there's a passion behind it, right? There's a passion behind helping our fellow colleagues heal from their trauma, whatever that trauma may look like. So Dr. Lorre, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I am just really looking forward to having this rich conversation with you and letting you share your story with the listeners.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be in a nursing community, and then to be in one in such a beautiful way where we can really unpack some of these challenges that we're all experiencing and shed light on maybe some narratives that aren't as accurate as they could be. So I'm here for it. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, your research suggests burnout is more complex than we often assume. Can you share what you discovered and how it reframes the conversation around healthcare workers' well-being?
Yeah, well, it started, for those of you who aren't familiar with me or my work, I'm a nurse scientist, and for my day job, I am a professor at a university where we are expected, as part of our job duties, is to conduct research. And so in about 2019, I started working with nurses. My clinical practice specialty is an integrative nurse coach. And so I was working with nurses who were burned out and were refractory to all the standard self-caring, evidence-based approaches to managing burnout or recovering from burnout. And so, like any good scientist, I said, I've got some research questions around that, right? And so I really started looking at what was happening with the nurses and deep diving the literature around burnout, which, as it turns out, was a phenomenon that was coined in the 1970s. When I had braces on my teeth and was working as a CNA at a skilled nursing facility, and not much had changed. And so we've had for the past half of a century this same sort of narrative, including the World Health Organization's definition of burnout. It's occupational stress that isn't effectively managed. And that just sounds like and feels like a little gaslighting for the people who are struggling. So I went outside of discipline. So at the time I was teaching for the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, which gives me this really beautiful multidisciplinary view to which I can get my geek flags out, wave them around, and deep dive the evidence base in the ways that people like I enjoy doing. And so I went over into relational neuroscience and neurophysiology, looking for answers, because I'm like, we are literally doing everything right as nurses. We know how to take care of ourselves. We know how to manage stress. We know. This isn't a knowledge deficit. This isn't a character deficit. This isn't a personality flaw. It is none of those things. So always good to start with what you don't know, because then that clears the path for exploring what you're curious about. And as I was conducting my research, I came across, Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory, which is, kind of this dynamic theory that really helps us frame what is happening physiologically. And there was another big theory I stumbled upon, which is called cell danger response theory, which has to do with how our mitochondria are affected by the nurse-specific trauma that we are experiencing. So I got and I know, Dr. Landry, you know this too, because you've had to do research just like, when you're onto something, you can feel it. Like even right now, I got full body chills. I'm like, yes, girl, And so that really lit a fire for me. And I started writing this book, and I started taking a polyvagal, trauma-informed approach to what was thought to be burnout, but I discovered that it was so much more. And in the course of doing that, I was writing the book, because it's like, this can't be, I have published as part of my day job. I'm required to publish in peer-reviewed journals. That's part of being a professor. And I had certainly published on these topics, but it wasn't getting into the living rooms of the nurses. 83% of them in the U.S. have burnout, report burnout symptoms, and 91% of nurses report having one or more PTSD symptom. And 1 in 4 nurses meet the clinical diagnostic criteria for PTSD. So I was like, well, I wonder if there's more to this story. And so I started working with the nurses in my practice. And I started, writing the book, because what good is it if it's in, sitting on a dusty shelf somewhere in a white pillar called academia, if nobody can access it and benefit, which required me to go to author school, because it's, this is a whole different type of writing. It's, it's a book that's written as though you and I are hanging out in your living room over a cup of tea. It's not a textbook. It's how can I show up for you in all that I am and all that I can do as I'm at the apex of my career? How can I be of service to my profession? And so that was like kind of the mission. And as I was writing this, and part of my day job, again, all these things we all have to do in our professional roles, right, is that it needed to be grounded in a theory. And ideally for nursing, a middle range theory, which most of us, like I roll, but I'm one of those geeky people that loves theory. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we don't have a nurse trauma theory that can underpin this, even though it's what I'm seeing, even though it's what my nurses are responding to in practice. And so one day, this is how you know. This is how you know you're on the right path. I'm on 10 bazillion listservs, like we all are, right, for emails, and the walls of text that I sift through every day, like we all do. And in one day, Dr. Karen Foley from Purdue University's middle range theory for nurse psychological trauma landed in my inbox. I was like, okay, we've got the science, we've got the theory, we've got the clinical practice, like check all the things that a really high level approach to helping nurses, and not only nurses as individual nurses heal, but also hospitals and healthcare organizations, because there's ways that we can go about onboarding and training and supporting our early career nurses, our nurse practitioners, our advanced practice nurses, that is more trauma informed, and also so that we are occupationally safe, which many nurses, quite frankly and quite literally, are not. So that was kind of the big story, like the book behind the book. And I thought when I sent it to the publisher, which, and here's another sign that you're on the right track, right? So here I am. I'm a debut author writing for like a general author audience. I'm not in academia. I'm not in the scientific community. I'm out here out in the wild with with all the other authors. Like, what do I do with this? And I don't have a literary agent. I wouldn't even know what I'm a nurse. How would I know what to do with a literary agent and publishers and, all of the next steps? And but I did some research and I submitted just three book proposals to 3 publishers, and one of them picked it up. My first at-bat. J.K. Rowling's had to hit over 100 before the Harry Potter series came out. So, I think there was a little I'm a profoundly spiritual person. And so I think I was getting a lot of divine guidance and support as, these, what I consider to be miracles. When you're knee deep doing research for 5 years and you're like, please don't tell me I am also writing the middle range theory. Please do not tell me that. It's in my skill set to do that, right? I'm trained to do that, but it was a lot. It felt like a lot at the time, doing the research, doing the clinical practice, writing the book, and now, and so then it landed in my inbox. I'm like, this is nothing short of a miracle.
Yeah.
The book gets picked up right away. I'm like, this is nothing short of a miracle. It's time. It's time for nurses to heal, reclaim their power. And by power, I mean empowerment in systems that would have us be less than empowered. Marginalized and oppressed are some terms and disenfranchised are terms that I use. So it's time, because we have a nurse staffing crisis. It can be argued. It could be argued that we have a nursing crisis. But when you really start looking at the underlying factors, as I know many nurse advocates are, it's like, oh, actually, we could have enough nurses. We don't have enough nurses who are willing to work in unsafe, unsupportive, disenfranchising, marginalizing, and oppressive workplaces where we don't feel safe because we aren't safe in many instances. And that's really what's driving the nurses from the profession. It's not burnout. It's not that we're not managing our stress. That's not it. It's that we live and work. We're inseparable. I don't have one nervous system when I go to work and another nervous system when I go home. I have one autonomic nervous system. I have one midbrain. I have one vagus nerve. And it doesn't differentiate between work stress and home stress. All it knows is safe or unsafe, and then how to respond to that at a very primal level that has kept humans alive over the millennia. So when we started really, and we can unpack polyvagal, we can unpack anything you want to unpack, but what happened in my clinical practice was when I started addressing the underlying trauma, which may have been unintegrated trauma, which means it was stored in the body from earlier times in life, either personal or professional. So that's sort of, I call them unhealed bits of wisdom, because they can't be fully integrated at the time for a number of factors. So they're stored in the body until conditions are favorable for healing, right? Or if there is trauma exposure, which Dr. Karen Foley, again, in her middle range theory, outlined avoidable and unavoidable, and presented it so beautifully, which we can also unpack. But if there's this huge trauma exposure that isn't part of the awareness, which is why I've gone to all this length now. 6 figures in 6 years of my own time and my own money into this. I self-funded this research. I didn't want want it to get, and you, I know you know this, we don't want to say it out loud, but there is bias in grant writing and grants that are funded and publications that are selected for journal articles, research that is selected for publication, and how all of that sort of labyrinth works. I was like, we don't have 17 years, because that's how long it takes, as you know, for research to work its way through from the bench into translation and practice. It's a 17-year arc. Our profession 17 years. So I'm just gonna shake my own personal piggy bank and make this happen.
Well, good for you. Good for you. And it's like, as you speak, I just have like chills going up and down my spine, because it's so, for me, it's poetic, and to hear someone just speaking my language, it's just chilling. And and this is why I started the podcast Nurses with Voices, right? To give us, and just going back to when you mentioned how we're oppressed, we're marginalized, and we don't have a voice when it comes to the healthcare system. And we really don't. And I know, there's there's an attempt with shared governance. There's an attempt with different leadership styles. And I get it. And I applaud them. For the most part, we truly do not have a voice. And there needs to be a change at almost like a legislative level. And I love how you mentioned the bias, right? The piece about bias, because that too, I can concur with. When the selections, I know there's a lady that I know who, she actually has a program where she helps not just nurses in, if you are looking to write a book, you go through her academy, and what happens is she gets you in front of the right people, utilizing all of her resources, because she understands what it's like. And she specifically works with women who are trying to write books, because she understands what it's like for that bias. And so what she does is she helps you build relationships with those publishers, so that when your book is ready, you can, now have a publisher who is going to publish your book. And
what
I say,
have done for that resource, right?
Yeah, right. But this is why I'm sharing it.
Yes.
Yeah. But this is why I'm sharing it, because to your point, there is a level of bias out there. And if you don't know it, and everything is about relationships. A lot of times it's about relationships. It's about who you know and who's going to help you to partner and collaborate with the right person. When it comes to healing, you cannot have a healing journey. I like how you put in Nurses of Healer's Heart, you outline strategies for recovery from nurse trauma and burnout. Can you share, what are the top takeaways that you want every nurse to know?
Well, I think it's important to know that none of us, first of all, let me dispel a couple of myths for people out there like myself, who to be fully transparent and real and in a very vulnerable sort of way, I have recovered from severe PTSD. That was so severe, in fact, that I sustained some limbic system impairment, which has taken a long, because, the brain doesn't like changes, right? And so this all predated my research, but I think really influenced. I think that's why I could see it. That's why I could see it so clearly, because I had lived it. And so for those of you who, like me, perhaps at that time, like, I think I've been through some, trauma, let's just start with what is trauma. According to Gabor Mate, one of the world's experts, it's what happens inside of us as a result to what happens outside of us, right? And so we can assume, according to the AACN, the American Association College of Nursing, says that we should, as nurses of any educational or professional rank, should assume that everyone in our care has experienced trauma. I was like, well, that's fair. And aren't nurses a subset of everyone? Mm-hmm. Oh, why doesn't matter? But why isn't in any of the AACN essentials? Why aren't we teaching this?
Right. Really? Right. And, I'll let you go. Yeah. Because I love
Well,
it. I love everything that I'm hearing, and I don't want to interrupt. I just want you to keep going.
I know, and I'm a talker girl, so you can interrupt anytime.
No, because everything you're saying is exactly what I've been saying. And so that's why I said to hear someone speak my language, it's like, this was so meant to be. I'm really just happy you're here and sharing what you're saying so that there's, and as a nurse scientist, to your point, that means there's research behind what you're saying. And I think that's the component that people miss. And it's just, we're just talking about burnout. We're just talking about trauma. No, we've lived it. I too have had a level of, to your point, PTSD. I think the mental health in nursing is a topic that we talk about and we discuss during the Health and Wealth Expo. So Dr. Lorre, you may not know this, I host events called the Health and Wealth Expo, and there's summits that we do in person and virtually. And the mental health component is always huge for me. And I always include that component. And at the last summit that was in person, we had someone speaking about mindfulness. We had someone, speaking about self-care, because we have to help heal the trauma, and we have to find, and just speaking to the layman people, right? Not only the healthcare professions, and speaking with the layman peoples, we have to be able to find ways to combat that burnout or combat our trauma. And I love how you describe it, because there is a level of PTSD, especially after COVID.
Well, yeah, and you're so right. And I need to be a part of that summit, just putting it right there. This sounds amazing. So what I really want people to understand is that you don't have to relive your trauma. All right. So a lot of times people are reluctant to even acknowledge that they have a trauma history. And when in fact, humanity sustained a major trauma several years ago. And many of us are still healing and recovering in different ways through all that we've endured. And that is just one example that we know landed in everyone's lives, right? So the other thing is that a lot of people, and this was a surprise, there's been a lot of unintended surprises that are beautiful as this work is finding its way out into the world. And so as I was applying the research, and so I have created a 4-step evidence-based framework that can be adopted by hospitals, healthcare organizations, individual nurses, over 100 practices. But what we need to really understand is that doing traditional self-care and mindfulness activities on top of a dysregulated nervous system is why nurses are not recovering. It's like think of a house. If we were houses, and the foundation of my house, all that rebar and concrete and all of this, the screws and nuts and bolts and everything that goes into making that foundation of a house strong. Well, think of that as your autonomic nervous system, your vagus nerve, and your midbrain, right? Which processes all of our flight or flight sort of thing, which is why you can't think or talk your way out of trauma. Is that it's happening in the midbrain, in the vagus nerve, and how it has been stored in the body over time. And so in my framework, we start, it's called the Innate Care Plan framework. And we start with that as the foundation. And starting with the regulated nervous system, learning the language of your nervous system. So the framework is the big framework is 3 A's plus a B leads you to the 3 R's. And you want the 3 R's. We all want the 3 R's. We should all have 3 R's. And our patients and our colleagues, we all need to be in the 3 R's. So quickly, the first A, and this is all the foundation, is awareness. Awareness of how your body stored the trauma, awareness of your autonomic nervous system, what circuits and hybrids that your midbrain, what Porges calls the threat detector, how that signals different physiological and behavioral responses, and then aligning the practices that support where your nervous system state is in that moment. Right? So awareness, and that's called attending. So I have 100 practices depending on where you are in flight or flight, sympathetic overdrive, fawning, freezing, dorsal vagal collapse. Most nurses and most health professionals and healers are not in the other circuits of play and stillness. So if you ask a nurse who's really stressed, in fact, I had some colleagues in Australia that I was doing some research with, and they're like, well, we just did this study with Bachelor's of Science, BSN students, and we had them do mindfulness meditation before their exams, and like half of them couldn't do it. I said, well, it's not available to their nervous system. They're coming in for an exam. They're in flight or fight. That is not congruent with stillness. And so it's matching up. And this is why the narrative of just do more self-care, nurses. You need to work on your resilience, nurses. You need to do better self-care. We're the ones that have the license that says we know how to do that for our patients. So clearly we know how to do that for ourselves. Right? So it's not a knowledge deficit. So the 3 A's are being aware, attending to your nervous system in these ways, and then aligning what's going on in your inner world with your outer world, or your outer world as it's affecting your inner world. And this is where we find a lot of incongruence, because we're feeling some kind of way on the inside, and there's circumstances in our external world that is creating our threat detector and this whole system, this whole trauma system, if you will, survival system, to react in a particular way. And so harmonizing, aligning our inner states with our outer realities. So that's like the foundation, the 3 A's. Now, on top of that, we can put the B, which is for balance, which are all the self-care things and wellness domains that we all know. We don't need to unpack any of that. But that's where most people start. I need to exercise. I need to eat better. I need to sleep better. And while, yes, all of that is true, right? So I'm not in any way minimizing self-care, but if it's not aligned with what the autonomic nervous system needs, or if it's not supportive of maybe some old trauma that is bubbling up because it's time for some healing around that particular trauma, then this is what I found in my practice is that was the opening of the log dam. And then healing started happening. And what we discovered is that many nurses, like many people, think we heal alone in isolation in a cave, like we are a bear, right, who will retreat to the den. And so I didn't know that I would be starting a nonprofit organization. I didn't know that I would be developing curriculum for hospitals and for individual nurses, 12-week healing programs to help prevent and address nurse-specific trauma and or burnout, and learn how to insulate ourselves. And this is where the empowerment piece comes in. So we all know that nurses are oppressed and disenfranchised. This is nothing new. I've been around since I was 15 as a CNA. It's the same story with different window dressing. So for nurses to come together as a global community, because I've studied Canada, Australia, and many countries in Europe. And even though we have different healthcare delivery systems, the common denominator is the same, where nurse safety and professional well-being is concerned. And what's preventing us from coming together is we're trying to work from our bleeding wounds, as opposed to our healing scars. And until we get to a point where we understand how to navigate our own nervous system and how to nurture and nourish. I don't use the word self-care in my work. I don't use the term resilience in my work. The people I work with, thousands of nurses, are like, please, you're gaslighting me again. So I'm just not using those terms. Nurture and nourish our nervous system and one another. So the last 2 chapters in my book are really developed for, like, okay, so what we found is that nurses were healing. They were healing. Their symptoms were resolving because trauma and integrated trauma also underpins a whole myriad of mitochondrial related chronic conditions, which I know you're probably far more versed in than I am as a little scientist over here. And you're a rock star clinician, so you work with it every single day. And so what we found is that we could then start. It's like, how can I maintain my healing gains? Like, I've made this progress, but I'm going to go to work, and my healer's heart is going to be run through the paper shredder, or I'm going to get steamrolled. It's not safe. I'm going to have too high of a caseload, a patient load. I'm being floated to a unit where I have zero training. I've got gaslighting, bullying, insufficient resources, and the list goes on. Right. And so coming up with 10 archetypes to help nurses who have got the basic proficiency of the language of the nervous system and the innate care plan framework, and they've made some healing gains. It's like, well, how do I maintain those in work? So I identified 10 archetypes that we can recognize in one another compassionately, as that remembering that every person on the planet has been touched by trauma. And so this difficult patient, this challenging colleague, asking the compassionate, I wonder what happened in their life story. Yeah. I wonder if there's some we don't have to know, we don't have to uncover anything, but recognizing how other people's trauma story shows up in their behaviors through these 10 archetypes gives us now a compassionate lens and framework through which to interact with one another. And then in the last chapter, I offer strategies and 3 sets of integrative nursing principles, the first of which were seminal to Kreitzer and Koithon. So I want to just give attribution there, and then developed 2 more sets to guide nurses and leaders in how do we frame and start building new policies, new legislation to ensure that nurses are safe and occupationally, professionally well in their roles. Because right now we have traumatized nurses taking care of traumatized patients.
Right. Yes. And I say that all the time because a nurse can, come out of a room just finishing a code and then have to walk right into a room of another patient and didn't put a smile on her face. So we never get a chance to really process that trauma. Whereas the average person, if they see someone getting hit by a car, that's traumatizing. I use that analogy to say nurses don't get that opportunity to process that. And we take it in and we just internalize it. And
it's stuck in the body.
It's stuck, exactly. Yep.
So what's really happening is that our workplaces, unknowingly, perhaps, I don't, perhaps, are asking nurses to please be dissociated while you work here.
Yeah.
And so here's where the big conflict is. And this is where millions of nurses are saying, I don't think so. We're losing anywhere between 25 and 40% of our new grads. They're like, are you kidding me? You want me to do what?
I didn't sign up for this.
and so it's really learning how to navigate this and also and so what I teach in my nonprofit academy, which again, I thought writing the book was it. I thought it was done. Like, bravo, you're ready for retirement. Go, girl. I was like, oh no, wait, there's more. And so what we found is that people don't ideally heal alone. So when you look to relational neuroscience and you look at all the studies in that, we are mammals, we are hardwired for co-healing and co-regulation. And also when we are in our professional roles, and especially those of us who are patient facing, direct patient care, we are supposed to be heart-centered. Mm-hmm. Patient-centered. But if the autonomic nervous system is not in ventral vagal tone, which means that we're relaxed, we're open, we're curious, we're regulated. We can manage. A little bit of sympathetic comes in to help us manage the stressors that are inherent with living and practice, right? That is the place where we can be heart-centered, open, and curious. But if we're in fight or flight or fawning or freezing or dorsal collapse, that ventral vagal, that openness, that curiosity, our ability to connect with our patients and our colleagues in the way that healthcare requires, in the way that healing has always required us to be fully present in those ways. Well, it's just not available. And so many nurses, especially our early career nurses, are like, there's no, and myself, I mean, I became a nurse at the age of 51.
Oh, wow.
So,
Oh, wow.
yes.
I love that.
Yeah, I was on my way and I had a huge back injury and life happened and I herniated L3, 4, and 5 and my doctors in the hospital I worked for at a CNA, they're like, yeah, no, we don't want you. And then at 50, I went back and by then I had both of my knees replaced and I wasn't allowed to go into practice then either. You're like, you're 50, you've herniated 3 discs and you have 2 artificial knees. Like, next. But that was all in service to me getting, of course, where I needed to be.
But look at you now, right? And look at you now.
Well, so,
Dr. Lorre, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. It is just exhilarating. And as I listen to you really unpack the self-care and the alternative language that you use, I love how you mentioned awareness. So when I do I literally just had a webinar and using the recovery solution. And I like to use layman terms and I get where you're coming from. I can relate. I definitely do. And awareness though, you can't beat that. You can't go around that because that, to your point, that is the foundation. And that's exactly what I teach, to your point, because we have to be aware that we're burnt out. We have to be aware that we're going through a trauma. We have to be aware so that we can identify what the stressor is. And I love how you mentioned balance because balance is the next step in my pyramid. So so just loving, so as I'm listening to you, I tell you, it's just like chills just going down my spine because it's just so exhilarating to hear someone just speak the same language and know that, and like everything you're doing, and like know that we're on the right track with really helping to heal our nursing community. So I thank you for all that you do. Thank you for coming onto the show and just sharing your gems of wisdom. And where can people find your book?
Well, my book, Nursing Our Healer's Heart, is available wherever books are sold. And for those of you who are interested in Flip Through the Bones, I'd be so grateful if you could write a review, because one of the things I'm learning is that Amazon won't show its books to nurses unless you have reviews. So I would be so grateful to anyone who flips through and sees that the bones are good and are willing to write a review. And then also on my website, and I'm going to spell it because my mom got super creative with my name. So my website is drlorrelaws.com, and that's drlorrelaws.com. And there you'll find a free assessment, and I'll send you a full report as to where you might be in the burnout, nurse-specific trauma spectrum, and then also links to masterclasses, town halls, and the 12-week programs that are offered through my nonprofit for both hospitals and for individual nurses, healers, and health professionals. So thank you so much. And it just is a testament too that you and I, as nurses and nurse scientists in our different ways that we are in those roles, so it's testament to the fact that the evidence is there. You've got it in your framework. I've got it in my framework. And there's so much overlap because we do have the evidence, and it's about shifting the narrative and the perspective and starting with a trauma-informed approach to burnout and then see what happens.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. I love it. I love it. All right. There you have it. Until next time, make sure you guys stay educated, stay inspired, and stay empowered.